So what's going on, guys? It's Jamie, it's speedboxing. Make sure you guys subscribe to this channel before you click onto any of the videos. Also comment below in the comment section if you guys have any opinions in what I'm saying in any of the videos. Like always, it is appreciated if you guys could drop me a quick sub or two on my channel. So this is an aftermath video from the fallout of the Chris Eubank Jr. George Groves fight from last Saturday night, in which George Groves won a 12-round unanimous decision against Chris Eubank Jr. So yeah, this video is basically going to talk about what we've learned from watching that fight. And you know what? After watching the fight, a lot of people are saying we should have known all along. This is what people are saying. We should have known all along. We should have listened to George Groves. We should have studied both fighters more. We should have looked at Chris Eubank Jr. more and looked at George Groves more, and then thought to ourselves, this could have happened. Because going into this fight, everyone thought this fight was a 50-50. I thought this fight was a 50-50. A lot of top people on YouTube who do videos thought this fight was a 50-50. The only person I saw really going with George Groves is Dwyer. And King Dwyer, he said that he didn't have Chris Eubank Jr. the favourite in the fight. He just couldn't believe that Chris Eubank Jr. was the favourite going into the fight, and he broke the fight down perfectly. Richard Dwyer, go watch his pre-fight video. He talks about all of George Groves' strengths, Chris Eubank Jr.'s weaknesses, and basically that's what we saw in the fight. But, you know what I mean, a lot of people, including myself, didn't realise how bad Chris Eubank Jr.'s boxing fundamentals were. I picked Chris Eubank Jr. to win the fight, even though I felt the fight was a 50-50 almost. I was slightly going towards Eubank Jr., but I said in my pre-fight that I wasn't sold on that prediction, but I had to make a prediction because I felt that Chris Eubank Jr., as the fight wore on, that he would eventually get into the fight. He would get on the inside of George Groves, wear him down, and maybe nick it on points or get a late stoppage against a tired George Groves. But Chris Eubank Jr. just couldn't get on the inside, and when he did get on the inside and had George Groves up against the ropes, he just couldn't do anything. He couldn't sustain anything because George Groves would nullify him. He would tie him up. He would use his physical strength, and he would spin Chris Eubank Jr. around. And Chris Eubank Jr., in my opinion, was wary of George Groves' punching power. He was wary of George Groves' physical strength, and he just didn't have the confidence to go forward and try and apply himself on George Groves, and he didn't have the boxing fundamentals to do it. He didn't use his jab to try and get on the inside. Chris Eubank Jr.'s jab was non-existent in the fight. All he was doing was trying to lunge in with big swinging shots because he couldn't get on the inside and use his patterned uppercut and stuff like that. He just couldn't do it against George Groves, and George Groves said it after the fight on his interview with IFL TV. Go watch it if you haven't. He said that he knew Chris Eubank Jr. would just think he could just go in there and blast me out of there, but he said other opponents have tried it in the past and have came unstuck, and maybe Chris Eubank Jr. should have watched George Groves' past fights, because I don't think he has. I don't think Chris Eubank Jr. has studied George Groves much at all. I think he's just been doing his usual shit in the gym, going in the gym, hitting the bag a fucking 1,000 times, hitting the pads 1,000 times, getting arse licked by Ronnie Davis and his dad, beating up Eastern European cab drivers and sparring and just going to plod forward, because he really felt he could just go in there and just put it on George Groves early on, and it just didn't happen. And even as the fight drew on and both men got a little bit more tired, Chris Eubank Jr. just still didn't do anything, because the difference in this fight later on, Chris Eubank Jr. was tired as well. Like, for example, in the Billy Joe Saunders fight, he lost the first 6 or 7 rounds of that fight, but because Billy Joe Saunders was knackered after 6 or 7 rounds, Eubank Jr. managed to get success because he wasn't tired. But in this fight, he was tired against George Groves, because George Groves' physical strength was just making him so tired. He was just wearing Chris Eubank Jr. down. So in my opinion, Chris Eubank Jr. needs to go back to the drawing board. If he's ever going to do anything at world level, he needs to take a look at this fight and he needs to see where he went wrong. Because if he watches this fight back and thinks that he did enough to win the fight, still, like I know after the fight he said that he felt that he did enough to win, but surely if he watches this fight back, he'll know that he didn't do enough to win the fight. Like, how could he think that he could win this? He won this fight. Like, it was plain to see that George Groves was in control. But, you know what I mean? The Eubanks are very deluded characters. I know they're entertaining and they're a laugh. I find them hilarious. But the fact that they came into this fight actually thinking they could just execute that kind of game plan against somebody like George Groves and didn't have a plan B was just ridiculous, in my opinion. Was just totally bad. That corner work, like, what the fuck was Ronnie Davis doing? He was just there wiping the sweat off fucking Junior, in my opinion. He wasn't doing fuck all. And Ronnie Davis is a decent trainer. You know what I mean? His dad, the instruction his dad was giving him, like, just poor. Like Tony Bellew said after the fight, that Chris Eubank Jr. could be possibly the worst advised boxer in British history. Because his dad's going around saying that his son's this, his son's that, his son can beat Golovkin, his dad's the next Mayweather, not that his son's the next Mayweather, and that his son could beat Andre Ward. Like, some of the shit and the bollocks that Chris Eubank Sr. has came out with is just absolute delusion. That's all it is. And he's watching his son beat up these plodders like Arthur Abraham and Anvi Yildirim, and he's thinking his son can go in there against world level boxers who are not plodders, who have got very good boxing fundamentals and do the same. Then it's just ridiculous, because his son needs to have a similar level of fundamentals to be able to trouble any of these world class fighters. Like, imagine if his son was back at middleweight and fought somebody like Danny Jacobs, for example. Like, at one point, Chris Eubank Jr. was mandatory for Danny Jacobs. Imagine if Chris Eubank Jr. would have fought Danny Jacobs. Imagine he would have got levered in that fight. Because in terms of boxing ability, Danny Jacobs is just levels and levels and levels above a Chris Eubank Jr. Especially after that performance against George Groves. Like, you know what? I'm going to give him respect for hanging in there the 12 rounds. He showed that he had a very good chin. That was one thing he said that was true. He had a very good chin, and that's something that we saw last night. And I've got to give him respect. He showed a lot of heart. You've got to respect any fighter that gets between the ropes. But it's just the fact that they just built himself up so much. Now he's going to have to drop back down, because people are not going to see him in the same light for a while. Because he was saying he was this, he was that, he's the second coming, but he just couldn't handle nothing George Groves was doing. He just couldn't handle it. He couldn't handle George Groves fainting. He couldn't handle feints or anything like that. And it was just a bad performance. Just a bad performance. And like I said, if he watches this fight back and thinks that he did enough to win the fight and that there's nothing wrong with what he did in there, and he goes into his next fight, or if he steps up again and does the same kind of thing, then he's just going to go nowhere. You might as well just do what Prince Nassim said and just fucking hang him up, because you're not going to win anything, because he's not willing to learn. You know what I mean? He hooked up with Adam Booth for one fight, and Adam Booth left because he said that Eubank wasn't willing to learn. He wasn't willing to listen. And when his dad's giving him instructions, even though it's fucking crap instructions, he's not listening. He's there, he's not listening, he's just nodding his head, he's not looking at his dad or anything like that. So, you know what I mean? This guy's not willing to listen, but if he wants to get anywhere in his career, he needs to listen. Because if he was with a world-class trainer and he didn't listen, then they'll just show him the door. You know what I mean? But the big problem last night as well was that he didn't have a plan B. It was plan A. The whole 12 rounds, just lunging and try and hit George Groves with a shot from the guards, try and hit him with a lucky punch. That's all he was doing. He was trying to box George Groves at range. Like, why? You know George Groves is a better boxer than you at long distance, so why would you try and stand there for 12 rounds and try and box with him from long range? Because you weren't confident in yourself to try and get on the inside, because you couldn't get on the inside because you didn't know how to do it against somebody like George Groves, who isn't like these plodders like Anvi Yildirim and guys like that. Like, you know what I mean? These are guys who are easy to get on the inside of because they're plodders, they're static targets. They're just standing right in front of you. George Groves, he's moving his feet, he's using feints, and Chris Eubank Jr. just couldn't handle it. And these are basic boxing fundamentals. Like, you know what I mean? It's just something that shocked a lot of people, to be honest, that he could be at that kind of level and be that bad and put on that kind of performance. And I know this video seems like I'm bashing him, but it's the truth. Like, I'm not saying anything that's not true. What Chris Eubank Jr. did last night, like, he was in there and he was out of his depth. Like, that's the honest truth. Like, he landed a few shots here and there, but he couldn't sustain it. Like, he just could not do it. So, at the end of the day, his dad needs to tell him as well that last night he just wasn't good enough, that he needs to work on some things, because if they think they can put on them kind of performances and then go into his next fight and not improve anything, then they're just never going to get anywhere. But his dad, at the end of the day, his dad's just there for the meal ticket, and his dad's just there for the money. His dad's saying he's this and that because his dad's trying to hype him up to the moon, because his dad wants to try and get as much money out of him as possible. His dad sees him as a product, and he's even said this in his own words, that his son's a product and that people need to pay for him. But, you know what I mean? It's alright bashing guys like Arthur Abraham up, who's the most static fighter to ever live, and plus he's 40 years old, and guys like Anvi Yildirim and Nick Blackwell, who just know nothing else but come forward and stand in front of you. But when you're in there with a top level boxer like George Groves, who knows the boxing fundamentals, who is a good boxer technically, then he's always going to struggle unless he hooks up with a world class trainer who's going to help him out, who's going to fix the holes in his game. Because if not, then he's just going to be at the same level his whole career, bashing up these static targets and then stepping up against a class boxer and losing. He's just going to be going in a circle. So, yeah, long video, but I just had to get that off my chest about Chris Eubank Jr. Got to praise George Groves as well, because George Groves put on a performance last night. He nullified Chris Eubank Jr. But at the end of the day, many other boxers would have done that last night. Many other boxers would have done it at middleweight and super middleweight. If he would have stepped in there with any top level boxer who is on the same kind of level as George Groves and even higher, like I said, a guy like Danny Jacobs at middleweight would have just ate him alive. So it is what it is at the end of the day. Comment below in the comment section.